Okay, so basically, we've now just finished talking about uh, and listing and looking at all the statistics uh, so that people can see that this is real. This radiation is real. Now, let's look at the different ways and list them and remind them how the global depopulation plan is being put in effect. And these are 4, 5, 6, 7 different ways. The first one being the polar vortex radiation cycle. Could you just bring us through that one again, just to make it absolutely clear for people?
Yes. When I explained the polar vortex and the very large increase, alarming increase in radiation levels across the United States from that nuclear typhoon, which was diverted to the Arctic and then split into two plumes, um, that, I mean, I'm a scientist, I'm a geoscientist, but I also love people. That's why I'm doing this. And I have to tell you, Alfred, I just almost couldn't believe that there were maniacs who would actually do this to every living thing on this planet. And I want to acknowledge to the audience that this sounds so otherworldly or just impossible to happen, but it has happened. And we are in a global extinction, and it's not hopeless. First, we have to have the right information, and Alfred, that's what you and I have been doing. Then we have to give people ideas on how to conduct themselves and what methodology to use for clean food, for clean water, and so forth and so on. And then we work on the political solutions, the governmental solutions, we need to reorganize humanity. But some of that just happens naturally when people come together over an issue. It brings people together and they start sharing ideas and they start finding solutions, really surprising ones. So this is not hopeless, but we're in the very beginning of a very, very dangerous process. And so when we discuss Putin's plan, I hope that people understand that there are leaders out there, global leaders, who are concerned about this and who oppose it. It's the weak ones or the greedy ones or the ones with character defects such as sociopathy and people who are just psychopaths. They're born that way or they're created that way by bad parenting or environment. So we're telling a very tall tale here, but it's well documented. It's scientifically backed up. It's peer-reviewed, published papers that I'm quoting and everything. So the scientific community is very aware of what's happening. The governments are very aware. The high levels of the military are very aware. And most of all, the medical profession, which is controlled in the United States by the Pentagon, by the military, to protect their weapons that kill everyone. They are the biggest problem, I think, because they are motivated more than anyone else, except maybe politicians who are involved in companies that sell these weapons and they profit themselves, so they have a direct incentive. These are very complicated issues, and when we talk about Putin, he's a very complex man. The Russian situation is very complex, but I think that people can get grounded in Russia and what Russia is doing and the steps they're taking and the steps Putin is taking to help all of humanity. he's not just helping Russians or just helping his oligarch friends. He's really dedicated and committed to creating a healthy society that is productive and also changing the whole global banking system, which is why we've ended up in this nightmare. So that's what I wanted to say to the public and assure them that I'm just as horrified and I was in just as much disbelief as they probably are. But if you go slowly and you listen carefully and you go onto the internet or into libraries or talk to friends who work in different areas of this nightmare, you will begin to build your own database of information, and you will know what information to trust and what not to, and also how to do critical thinking. I mean, this is a great adventure. It's a great opportunity to change our lives, to mature, and to grow and develop. So don't be afraid. Just wade into the waters and trust that you'll learn how to swim.
Right, right. So, uh, who is really behind this depopulation program? I mean, I know that we were talking about this before the program, and we're going to get into some of the detailed programs to finish this off. But who who is driving all of this? Who really wants to get rid of us all?
Well, watching these HARP storms and these nuclear typhoons being manipulated was truly horrifying for me. That's what I really had a hard time um, getting a grip on or accepting that it was really happening. But I just reported, I mentioned, we talked about the polar vortex already, and that term, polar vortex, is a new term for that used by weathermen and people in the official media for what is a HARP phenomenon. It's artificially created to cause depopulation, but to hide it, they have to think up new words and new terms and new labels, and then later on they'll rebrand them and call them something else. But when I was watching the wind map and I saw a typhoon go from Taiwan up to offshore from Fukushima, and then it did a big U-turn and it went all the way down to New Zealand. Well, that isn't what storms normally do. They don't just globetrot all over the world wherever they want to. There are air currents and ocean currents and all kinds of natural cycles within cycles that determine where a storm goes, how big it is, and what kind of disaster it causes. So, with a long history that I have of weather that was natural, they started weather manipulating during the Vietnam War. It was called Project Popeye. Um, I know what is normal. The young people don't know what is normal when they've only seen chemtrails and HARP weather. So they're at a great disadvantage. The older people know. Um, and so I noticed, I tracked this plume that went all the way down the the east side of the North and South America, and it went right into New Zealand. And I called my friend in New Zealand. She's on the South Island, and she's been updating me because exactly what's happening in California by Homeland Security and FEMA is what's happening in the South Island of New Zealand. And so we're like sharing information, and they're using the same technologies there that they're using here. So this is a single source planning center with vested interests who are at the top of these schemes and these templates. And at the very top are ancient Iranian families from Central Asia who traveled to Persia and participated in the Parthian or the First World Empire. Then they moved into Eastern Turkey, and from there I'm talking about BC. This is thousands of years ago. The same families are running the world now. And then they moved into Italy, and they started the 12 main Etruscan cities. And the Etruscans collapsed or disappeared, and the Roman Empire was born. And so that's who's doing it. It's the Farnese family. They are the top family. One of their ancestors was Pope Paul III in the 1500s. He started the Jesuits in the mid 1500s. He knew exactly what they were for. They were to rape and to ruin the world, to plunder for the benefit of the Vatican and these papal families who intermarried. So it's really fun. It's really an adventure. It's really the kind of research I like to do. So I guess I'm good at it because I really love it. And those are the people doing it. So why would they guide these plumes of highly radioactive material into New Zealand? Well, Janet Napolitano, who was the head of FEMA, and she was the head of Homeland Security. She's now the president of the University of California, so she's running the nuclear weapons labs now in the U.S. She went to 15 countries in the Commonwealth, Queen Elizabeth's kingdom, and signed them up, made contracts with them for the Department of Homeland Security and FEMA to provide services to them. Now, my friend in New Zealand said Janet Napolitano was in New Zealand, in Christchurch, when that huge HAARP earthquake destroyed the city just a couple years ago. And she also told me that there are corporations in the U.S. military, Homeland Security, FEMA, all over New Zealand, especially the South Island, and they're involved with corporations and royal families who want to make money. So that's what it's about. And they're fracking down there. Big companies are fracking. They're doing oil exploration and gas exploration. But I think what they're really doing is using that as a cover to use lethal technologies on the populations of New Zealand, on the North Island and the South Island, so that they can depopulate, and they can use the South Island, which they have, the British have removed from the island, from the nation of New Zealand. The South Island has been annexed by the British to be the headquarters for mining in the Antarctic. And so these are the levels of interest and the vested interests. And of course, Homeland Security is just the Jesuit Gestapo. It's run exactly like the Jesuits run their organization. It's a terrorist organization. It's all military. And it's not to make Homeland secure. It's to destroy the population so that Homeland can change ownership. That's what they're doing. And they can harvest the lumber and timber. They can mine all the minerals. And that is who is behind all of this. It's royal families. It's the Dutch East India Company and the East India Company that are run by the Jesuits. And by the way, they still exist. And it's corporations down there, Chevron, British Petroleum, Shell, Royal Dutch Shell, which is shared, owned by Queen Elizabeth and the Queen or the King of the Netherlands. And so then I noticed this storm full of radiation was then diverted up over Australia. Well, Australia is being filled with boat people. These are people who come in boats illegally and land on the beaches of Australia, and they're being welcomed now. And the Australian population is just being shoved into cardboard boxes that they call coffins. They are telling the people, the government, that they're going to be buried in cardboard coffins when they die. And of course the Tony Abbott, who just was the host of the G20 in Australia, he is a Jesuit. He's Jesuit trained. Obama is Jesuit trained. All 7 chiefs of the security and intelligence agencies in the U.S. are Jesuit trained. 10% of the members of Congress, at least, are Jesuit trained. John Kerry is Jesuit trained. I'm sure the Clintons are Jesuit trained. And 7 out of 9 of the U.S. Supreme Court justices are all Jesuit trained. So what's happened since 1776, when the United States became a country, in a little over 250 years, it's been completely infiltrated by the Jesuits. They assassinated 5 U.S. presidents, or attempted assassination, in 25 years, up to the Civil War. Lincoln was the 5th one that they assassinated. And these people are crazy. They're absolutely, completely insane. It's nothing rational. It's nothing morally correct. It violates all of the norms, the rules, the laws, common law, everything. It's just a super criminal operation.
Right. Now, just to follow through on some of the details, you were saying that now, starting with New Zealand and then into 15 other countries, and in fact into the Bay Area there,
Yes,
they're bringing in a new generation of EMF weaponized transmitters into the city light poles. Could you talk about that are part of the depopulation equipment?
this is all part of the Jesuit scheme, the Jesuit template. And what we are noticing since January 1st, 2014, just a couple months after Janet Napolitano arrived to take over the University of California, well, she brought Homeland Security and FEMA with her. And she is running them out of the University of California President's office. On a recent visit to the Berkeley campus, there are military specs antennas of every kind you can imagine and design on all of the buildings on the campus and the whole perimeter of the campus, including huge pizza box or flat array antennas that are very, very powerful. And they are using pain projection, or the transmission of pain from these antennas to control the population. And I went up with a friend to the campus, to walk across the campus to the other side where I had a friend with a restaurant. And we were crippled for hours just from walking across that campus. And like every 3 minutes, students would walk up and they'd smile at us. They were every ethnic group from any kind of country you can imagine. Americans, they're faculty members, everything. And they would smile and they'd have a cell phone and they'd hit us with a pain beam coming out of their cell phone. We walked back across the campus, the same thing happened. And then we were walking up and down the streets around the neighborhood that I live in, which is just a few blocks from the campus. And we noticed new cables and wiring, like this big around bundles in a black plastic wrapper that they're putting on houses. They're rewiring and bringing in much higher amperage electrical flows into houses, apartment buildings. I noticed for about 5 years that there were extension cords from my house to the house next door, to the garage, and then into the house next door, and then to 3 more houses up the street. So I was plugged into them without knowing them or what they were doing or why they were interested in me. Well, the guy next door worked for Oracle. He's a civilian, or he's a contract planner, computer expert for Oracle. So they were using me for human experimentation without my consent, without informing me, and they're doing it to lots of other people. Well, what did they do? What did Berkeley and UC Davis and UCLA and the University of California campuses do with Stanford? They brought all of these demonic technologies and social engineering from the Tavistock Institute in England. And the Tavistock Institute in England is the head of the snake for all this perversion and destruction of humanity on the genetic level, to the physical level, to the environmental level. So they are screwing up everyone, everything at all scale and all levels. Every genetic piece of material on this planet is now under attack by these psychopaths. And the EMF attacks are not only painful, but they are transmitting neural, what is it called?
Neuro-linguistic programming.
Oh, yes, neuro-linguistic programming. And more direct mind control. And I see them doing it to animals and people's pets and wild animals, birds and stuff. And they just have all these students housed in these apartment buildings, and there's always a cell house next to them where they go in from their apartment buildings and they get trained. They get trained on hacking into computers. They get trained on how to disrupt social situations. They get trained on how to spy on other workers in an office they may be placed in. And at night, we hear them having their parties. The windows are open in the summertime, and they are gleefully talking about overthrowing the United States government. And they put Knights Templar flags on their balconies, and they put the flag of California on the balcony, and then they put the American flag on the balcony and they turn it backwards or upside down, which means they're overthrowing this country. Now, a lot of students come, sponsored by the George Soros Foundation, Open Society, and they're the ones who are trained in overthrowing their own governments, and they're sent back to their countries, and those are the color revolutions. The Tulip Revolution, the Bulldozer Revolution, the Orange Revolution in Ukraine, all these revolutions, and the two revolutions that didn't have a color name are Occupy in the United States and Canada, and Occupy that's ongoing now in Hong Kong. And they're using young students who are under mind control from their cell phones and radio antennas, transmissions through TV, through cell phone towers and antennas, all kinds of ways, police antennas. And they are gang stalking, destroying civil society, terrorizing neighborhoods and people walking up and down the sidewalk minding their own business. And they came out of Tavistock through Stanford University and the University of California, and the Berkeley campus, the Davis campus, the UCLA campus are indicators of how lethal and how venal and how absolutely insane the promoters of the transhuman movement are all about. I'm seeing them every single day. They're absolutely crazy. And they're taking mentally disturbed, mentally altered people who have been exposed to radiation from nuclear bomb testing, nuclear power plants, accidents, and they're causing accidental nuclear releases all over the US and other countries now. And it's to destroy the mental capacity, to diminish it, and it's genetically passed on to all future generations. It's irreversible. So they are destroying the genome of this planet that is in perfect balance, and it took 4.5 billion years for it to evolve to the beautiful creatures and environment that plants and animals that we have on this planet now. And they've destroyed it by total global nuclear pollution since World War II, the Manhattan Project, and the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombing. And I am really outraged about it as a mother, as an American, and especially as a scientist. Why would other scientists participate in this when it's killing them and their own children? It's insane. And so I said, it has to be enhanced. It has to be the mind control transmissions. And I started looking at the bases, military bases, mind control bases in Antarctica. England has 9 mind control military bases in Antarctica. And what they're doing is in training the entire Earth's magnetic field. The field lines come, the Van Allen belts come out of, they're generated inside the Earth. They come out of at the Antarctic end of the Earth, and they go back into the Earth in the Arctic. And so anybody who has a base down there and the proper equipment can entrain part of or all of the Earth's magnetic field, and they can target any population anywhere in the world sitting at a computer like you and I are right now, typing computer keys. They're controlling the whole world that way. And the behavior. And they're manipulating elections. They're manipulating learning in schools. They're manipulating behavior in public and in private. They're manipulating pets and animals. I had blood all over my arms and all over my legs from my cat going outside, and I didn't want him to go outside because the chemtrails are full of pathogens and poisons and radiation. And they turned it on when I tried to pick him up, the mind control, and they made him super aggressive. Well, guess what? Here's a NATO Life Sciences publication, The Biology of Aggression, published in 1981, and it's 647 pages of experts on the biology of aggression, and they're the ones who did the scientific research so that it could be weaponized and applied to animals and humans. So there it is. It's NATO, and the main publisher of scientific papers is Springer Verlag in Germany, but there are many, many other publishers of scientific papers involved in this, and it's all hidden. The Jesuits are doing it for thousands of years. They knew that energy waves and science made money, and they've been studying and working with energy waves and this mind control stuff and teleportation and all kinds of things like that. They were working on it in the basement of the Vatican. And it's to have total power, and control over humanity.
Right. So, in fact, you have a whole list of papers there that fit directly into
Yes,
what are now known as the transhumanist agenda.
yes,
And so it looks like the transhumanist agenda is part of the depopulation program.
it absolutely is.
It all fits in.
Yes,
And you now have been have agreed to be um, an expert consultant to the new Transhumanist Agenda War Crimes Tribunal that was established as part of the recent conference in Brussels.
I'm going to be an expert witness,
Yes.
actually.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
It's a little bit different
Yeah.
than a consultant.
Yeah. Expert witness. Yes, sorry.
So I want to read a few publications by NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, from their science series, and this section is called Life Sciences. Now, what's interesting is that all of these were published in countries that are on the doorstep of Russia. And that would start with Lithuania and Latvia, all the way down through Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Ukraine, probably Moldova, maybe Romania, and Azerbaijan. And they were all published between about 1998 and 2002. Now, I noticed going to University of California Regents meetings, that's the board of directors for the Regents, that, and they're all warmongers, that they were suddenly very excited about the revival of nuclear weapons, but they were talking about mini nukes that don't have a mushroom cloud, and they're the most efficient of nuclear warfare because they are 5 kilotons or under, and they poison an area with neutrons. That's a nuclear component, nuclear energy, but it decays after about 2 weeks. And we did get bomb crater samples from the Israeli attack on Lebanon, and they were using them along the borders of Lebanon with Israel, and depleted uranium and all kinds of other things. And what I discovered is that the Israelis were using them, the US gave them to them, to depopulate Israel. They're bombing and polluting and causing radiation illnesses in the Israeli population because they're through with Israel now. They've gotten into the Middle East. They've wrecked they've taken over the oil and gas, and that's under Anglo-American control and other countries. China's bought bought into it, some of the oil fields. But the Israeli population is much more targeted than the Palestinian, believe it or not. And suddenly, a week or two ago, Netanyahu, who's the head of Israel, got in the public media. He said, "Oh, I just discovered that, we're not Semitic. We're not from the Middle East. We're not from the Palestine area. The Ashkenaz Jews are Khazars. They're from the Kazakh Federation of Tribes from Central Asia that spread all the way to Eastern Europe." He said, "The Ukraine is our homeland, so our original homeland, so we're going to take it back." So I went and looked up their DNA. And their DNA of the Israeli Ashkenaz Jews indicates they're Iranian tribes from Central Asia, and they are not Khazars. I mean, Kazakhs or Khazars. They're Iranian tribes. So all this global nuclear kabuki theater blaming Iran for this, and we're going to bomb them, and we're going to bomb them, and we're going to bomb them, Those are their cousins. It's all nuclear kabuki theater. They will never bomb Iran.
Right, right. Now, so that while we're looking at all of this, the basic formula that in depopulation they seem to be following is one that you and I had discussed uh, earlier, and that is to you decrease birth rates and you increase death rates. Is that
That's
the
correct.
basic formula and what they're following here with nuclear and with everything else? Could you walk us through all the various ways that they're doing it?
Well, when I got into the CIA fact book, which is online, they publish demographs every year that are reported by month on changes in birth rates, death rates, fertility, all kinds of things like that. It's all about populations and changes in different parameters of populations. So I started looking at their data, and of course, it's for other CIA agents. Like most Americans wouldn't have no idea what they were reading about. And I went, oh my God, this is what they're really doing. And so then they blocked the site. But I got a lot of graphs before they did that. And I was able to plot in Iraq, for instance, or in Lebanon or in Israel, exactly where the nuclear weapons had been used and what year and what month, because it's reflected in the CIA demographic reporting. And that's how I started to really understand when I looked at the graphs that may go all the way back, the data to 1950s or even before that. And then I said, I see what they're doing. They are shaving off the population, the oldest and the youngest. So they're attacking fertility, they're increasing infant mortality on the youngest side and shaving off population there. And then they're putting agents and pathogens and so forth out there that people think it's normal every day in their food or whatever. They think it's harmless. But it's done in such a clever way that they may use 2 or 3 or 4 different agents and introduce them at different times into the person's body, maybe through cereals, maybe it's GMO wheat. And then later on, they get a vaccination. And then later on, they get something else, spray on fruit or radiation from Fukushima or a nuclear power plant. And then there's a 4th agent that interacts with the 3 agents or 2 or 3 agents, and it turns it on and makes it lethal. So then you're stripping off the oldest part of the population because they've already been damaged, and their biological systems have been compromised by disease and other things. Your genetic heritage counts a lot too. And so what they're doing is shaving off the oldest and the youngest. And Chernobyl decreased the life expectancy of Russians by 10 years. So instead of people dying at 75, they're dying at 65. And now Fukushima has happened, and people are going to be dying much younger. They're dying in their 40s now. And even toddlers are dying of heart attacks at 1.5 years old from the Fukushima cesium concentrating and damaging their hearts. So anything can happen now. Now that plume that was sent down to New Zealand to poison them with Fukushima radiation and then all over Australia, well, the Australian continent is having a huge increase in mining uranium for the nuclear power plants, and The nuclear power now is being pushed in African countries, China, other places that didn't have it before, and it's all for depopulation. And the people at the top know that. And they need the uranium. Australia's full of uranium, lots of mines there. And so they are using uranium dust and depleted uranium from all of the training military bases in Australia, which are now shared 50% with America. So Americans can take over any weapons they want to, illegal or legal, in the United States, and nothing is said because nothing is checked and there's no oversight by the US president or sign off by him or Congress, because now the Australian bases that we share officially with Australia are considered to be American bases, and it's just an interbase transfer. When we fly them over there, we've done the same thing with Israel.
Hmm.
So they can fly illegal weapons all over the place, use them in any country they want to, and nobody knows.
Right, right. Do we
Now,
have it? Sorry.
oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask. I know that almost immediately after Chernobyl, I'm not Chernobyl, after Fukushima in 2011, you and I did a program where we projected based on data what the death rate would be in the United States alone for 2011 based on the Fukushima radiation. Do we have any estimates at all on what this global depopulation program is doing to date? Say in we're now toward the end of 2014. Do we have any? Are they succeeding?
Oh, absolutely. But they're and what they're doing is they're monitoring the radiation levels in the environment. They're monitoring the death rates in the hospitals and the crematoriums and the um, where they take people to put them in coffins. And uh, Cheney, all through the 2003 Iraq War, sent an Italian French journalist to all over Iraq. He had carte blanche with the military anywhere he wanted to go to take samples, environmental samples. He had a direct phone line to Cheney in his vice president's office in the White House. And they talked every day, and Cheney was having him take samples. Cheney even went over and met him in Iraq at least once. And they are monitoring the radiation levels, looking at the kill rates that they're getting reported in hospitals and abortions, spontaneous abortions, and so forth, birth defects. And they're increasing the dose. They're going back and sending more Fukushima plumes over areas so that they get the desired kill rate. I don't know what it is, but I know they have said publicly, the Club of Rome, David Rockefeller, probably Bertrand Russell, the most dangerous man in the 20th century, people like that who are all in the in crowd. Ted Turner, lots of people in that club have said they're reducing the population from what was 6 billion or something to 500 million.
Right, right. And so if we look at the formula of, say, food plus the chemtrails plus the vaccines plus the radiation, and all that is being put into people's bodies, it's that
Compounds. Yes, it
all of that
compounds.
compounds, and people don't know it, but it's been we'll be doing a report on it. For example, in the Obamacare regulations, there is an Obamacare code for the use of guillotines, so that if there's a pandemic which will show that the quote Ebola pandemic is actually a biowarfare pandemic
That's right.
through the Ebola vaccine, where in some cases, uh, uh, Obamacare would actually pay for the guillotines to kill all of those who have been taken to FEMA camps and who have been designated as incurable under this biowarfare. It's sort of the industrial level World War II Nazi
Executions.
executions built into Obamacare, passed by the U.S. Congress Democrats. All of these regulations signed by George H.W. Bush, Clinton, George W. Bush, and Obama, setting up the pandemic, um, the false flag pandemic martial law execution endgame.
It's called the Jesuit Minuet.
Yeah, yeah, and that's all there, and people can go to just Google Ebola Gate, and you'll be taken right to a website that sets all of these out. Now, before we end this section, this is section 1, in which we're contemplating death, and I recall what was it that the person who said, "I am made death, the destroyer of worlds," and that was
Oppenheimer.
Oppenheimer. Um, are there any points that you'd like to make on this particular section that we may not have made yet?
Yes, I just wanted to finish where they sent that plume after New Zealand and Australia.
Right.
And what they did is they sent it down to New Zealand, and then they turned it around and sent it up to Australia, across Australia. They want to kill all the white people. And then they directed it right into Southeast Asia, which is part of Obama's pivot to Asia. They're depopulating that whole area because they want to mine all those island arcs, Bali and Indonesia and Malaysia, Vietnam, all that region, Myanmar, to sell those minerals and metals to China as their economy pumps and they build their country and the infrastructure. They'll make huge amounts of money. Then it went to then it went over the Central Asia and the Middle East, but on its way it went over the war zone in the Ukraine, where the separatists or the pro-Russian ethnic Russians are trying to separate from the Ukrainian illegal government. And they had no choice because the Ukrainian, this junta that took over, which is illegal, many members of the junta, including the president and the prime minister, stated publicly that they wanted to use nuclear weapons on pro-Russian people who were ethnic Russians in Ukraine and wipe out all of them. Those people at the top have very close ties to Israel, and they are Ashkenaz Jews who came out of nowhere and just overthrew the government. The CIA actually did it. They're using Gladio and the extreme nationalist right Nazi elements in the country left over from World War II. And so that's what's happening. But what I wanted to say is that they actually diverted that plume that went through New Zealand and Australia and Southeast Asia over the war zone of the resistance in the Ukraine, not into Russia and not into the rest of the Ukraine, just over that war zone. And then they piped it into the Middle East, Central Asia and the Middle East, and then into the Mediterranean region and Europe. So this is the collapse and the demise of the Western economy. And it's Putin and Russia, with China involved too, that are they're building the new economy. And we're going to talk about that in the next section of this interview. But I did want to talk about the nuclear accidents and releases that are happening all over the U.S. now, from nuclear dump sites, nuclear waste storage facilities, reactors, nuclear power plants, and all this stuff has been stored supposedly safely. Well, now it's all leaking, and there was a particularly bad one at the WIP project, the Waste Isolation Pilot Project, which I worked at as a geochemist when I was employed as a staff scientist at the Lawrence Berkeley Lab between 1989 and 91. And that was a horrific, huge release of tritium, which is radioactive hydrogen. It attaches to water, and it has a much longer biological life in the body because it attaches to protein, and protein stays in your body. It provides nutrients and stuff for body mass and muscle building. And so tritium also sterilizes baby girls, unborn girls, and women. It's a horrific infertility agent, and it's in our drinking water. And that plume coming out of the WIP project near Carlsbad Caverns in New Mexico flooded the whole entire East Coast, from the Rocky Mountains to the Atlantic Ocean.
So that's part of the depopulation to reduce the birth rate.
Yes.
That part of the
Yes.
part of the equation.
And since we're going to Putin next, I'd like to read the titles of these life science publications published by NATO in their science series on life sciences, because all of these authors almost were from that strange triangle of Eastern Europe between the border of Russia and the European countries such as Italy, Greece, Austria, and parts of Germany. And there's a no man's land. It's a triangle shape from Latvia and Lithuania all the way down from the Baltic coast to through the Ukraine to the coastline of the Black Sea. And that has been targeted for a very, very long time, with famines, with slaughters, with Nazi uprisings. Like 4 or 5 times every 100 years. They kill off most of the population. So this NATO Life Science series, these papers that were published for NATO, and the research was paid for by NATO, are from scientists in those countries that are targeted for depopulation, and they're on the doorstep of Russia. So this is very relevant and very pertinent to what we're going to talk about with Putin. Now, these are the titles, and these books are 300 and 400 pages long. Targeting of drugs, protein, lipid, and membrane traffic, pathways and targeting, beyond the map, the nonlinear dynamics in the life and social sciences. And nonlinear creates margins that they can exploit and expand and use in very strange ways. Use of agriculturally important genes in biotechnology, protein modules in cellular signaling, nitric oxide, molecular mechanisms of signal transduction, dynamic structure and function of biological macromolecules, computational models of auditory function, intermolecular crosstalk in tumor metastasis. That's cancer. How do these cancers, multiple cancers in a person, talk to each other? And depleted uranium creates many cancer sites because one atom of uranium under the right conditions can start cancer. And so when they started looking at cancer in soldiers exposed to depleted uranium, each cancer was genetically unrelated to the other cancers in the body. So it's from the nanoparticles of the uranium that the cancer is being caused, and multiple ones in the same body. You can't ever get rid of it. You're full of depleted uranium nanoparticles. Genes, fossils, and behavior. Molecular mechanisms of transcellular signaling. Vascular endothelium, mechanisms of cell signaling. So you see they're interested in blocking cell signaling. That makes a body function as a disease, causes disease. Advances in molecular ecology, hydration processes in biology. So you can see that one of the top main military organizations in the world is doing very, very sophisticated, very in-depth, very granular research and utilizing it for very dark purposes. And NATO is controlled and was set up by the Jesuits. These are research papers for nuclear wars that they're using now in different weapons, and also for the transhumanism movement. And I think the nuclear pollution was to create a biological environment from radiation damage from which they can create their transhumanists.
Right. Exactly.
And remember what the Jesuits do. They they embrace, then they enfold, and then they extinguish. Embrace, enfold, extinguish. And I'm watching it happen in 6 months in the Ukraine, and that country, which was the wealthiest and most advanced country in the Soviet Union, has been completely destroyed. Since November of 2013, 1 year ago.
Well, now it seems that two further entities are on the chopping block or on the targeting for the Jesuits. One is the United States of America, and the second is the rest of the planet. So these things are coming home to our audience. But is that not the case?
Yes, that's the case. And there's so much propaganda and garbage and lies in the mainstream media. We know we don't get the straight story from them. But they have really been demonizing Putin. And, I didn't trust someone who was KGB and from the former Soviet Union and so forth and so on. But I've been watching him very carefully, especially through the lens of the Ukraine disaster, and learning more about him through the BRICS, the creation of BRICS and everything. And then we got this great article today about what he's really doing, which has not been his real agenda, has not been in the news at all, because he doesn't release things until it's the right time and until he's ready, until he's sure he will not make a mistake, and he's sure that it will fly. And what he's doing is quite different from what the mainstream media is doing. he's trying to right the wrongs of the psychopaths who are in charge of the insane asylum now. And he's doing a very, very good job. And so what we need to do is to investigate what he's really doing, feel comfortable and secure and satisfied that it's the right thing and for humanity, and then to help him. And we can help him a lot by challenging the mainstream lies and challenging people who are bad-mouthing him all over the world and in our own countries, including our politicians. And I just want to make a point that the gross national product increased the salary and the standard of living of Russians in 2013 by over 11%. Now, let's pencil that out with Obama and compare all the good Obama did for Americans and how he increased our standard of living and security compared to Putin. And I think Obama's going to get an F minus, and I think Putin is going to get an A plus plus plus. But people need to stop believing the mainstream media and the television and start looking in alternative places and on the internet and doing their own investigations and talking to older people about what they know, about what they've seen, about what's being repeated, and to learn about history, because it tells us who, what, when, where, and why of the now.
Very good. Well, on that note, we'll take a short break and we'll be back with the second section of this program, which is on the plans of Putin and the future of Russia and of our planet. Thank you.
Thank you, Alfred.